Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about custom shapefiles in Spotfire, specifically custom shapefiles in Spotfire 6.0. For those of you familiar with using custom shapefiles in Spotfire, things are a little different in 6.0. For those of you not familiar with shapefiles in Spotfire, let's just have a brief review. Custom shapefiles let us look at different shapes using the ESRI shapefile format. They're effectively a bunch of points that are connected by lines that have some value associated with them that lets us fill them with things and put shapes on top of them. In this case, we're looking at a Albers equal area projection version of the United States. As we've seen before, the standard US map in Spotfire looks fine when you look at the 48 states, but Alaska can be a bit large. It can be kind of messy, particularly when we want to have values in it. It can kind of squish the United States and it looks sort of ugly. We can have Alaska be this little tiny area down at the bottom that we don't need to worry about so much, and we can see information represented cleanly. How do we load a shapefile into Spotfire? We load a shapefile just like we would any other data table. We add our data table, and then we just add from a file. We navigate to our shapefiles, and you pick whichever one you want. In this case, we're looking at usstate.shp. Now you see here that I'm looking at the shapefile itself. I'm not just using Spotfire's menu. The reason why is that when we see this in Spotfire, all that we get is the SHP. But we have to be sure that all the other metadata associated with that shapefile is in the same folder as the shapefile that we want to use. Otherwise, all we're going to get are the vectors, the points. There won't be any Latin longs, there won't be any state names, there won't be any county names, there won't be anything associated with those shapes. And at that point, they're effectively useless because we can't associate any other information with them. So the takeaway here is make sure that all this other stuff is along with your shapefile besides just the SHP file. Once we have it loaded into Spotfire, how do we use it now? Well, it used to be that all you would need was just to load it and it would automatically come in. Now it's not as simple. If we create a new map, it defaults to the map layer, and it'll usually stick points on top of it. We can't just drop down and select our data table anymore. Now we have to use our layers. Now we don't want this map layer, and I can just go ahead and get rid of this point layer altogether. The way that we add our new shapefiles, we go to Add, and we add a feature layer. In my previous presentation, I talked about adding in feature layers from the built-in Spotfire libraries. And again, this is the easiest way to do it, especially if you're laying these shapefiles over the existing map layer. But in a situation like ours, where it's not really going to fit on the map layer anyway, we can load our custom files. So here's the file that I just loaded, US_state. See, this is different than US states. This is US_state. So I say load, and I get this giant mess. It's a big block of nothing. Well, what happened there? Well, this comes to the coordinate reference system. The coordinate reference system is, look at it like a Cartesian coordinate system. And it tells Spotfire how to read the different points in this Cartesian system. Where is 0 at? And if it puts the 0 by 0 coordinate in one place, or it puts the 0 by 0 coordinate in another place, and the two are in different coordinate systems, well, it's going to be a big mess. It's not going to work. It'll make a big block like that, or not show up anything at all. Without worrying too much about the math involved or any type of Euclidean geometry, what you need to do is make sure that the coordinate reference system is set to the same thing on your map charts property as on your feature layer. So I go to Appearance, and I make sure that the projection reference system is set to Web Mercator. If I set it to none, nothing's going to happen here. I set it to Web Mercator. I go back to my layers, go back to my feature layer, and make sure it's at Web Mercator. If I go to Lola, I get a big rectangle. If I go to none, I get nothing. Web Mercator gives me what I want because they're the same thing. Now, I have my shapes in place. I want to give them some data. We talked about all the metadata behind the shapefiles. Here's where that information comes in handy. I want to geocode by, in my US state data, because that's what I'm looking at here, geocode by state name. Now that I know that I'm going to be assigning some value to the state name, I can go to Colors. I can pick the data table that I want to use to color these shapes by. Again, I'm going to pick Superstore, and I'm going to pick sum of profit. And I get my states filled in. How did it know which state was which? It's because I've created a column match between the US state, US_state, state name, and the Superstore dataset, state. We can look at this a little closer. We can see that our sample values of Alaska, Illinois, we know that those states are in the same format so that they can create a relationship between the two tables. Okay, now we have colored states. But we want to add another layer on top of it. What good are these new multiple layer features if we can't use multiple layers? We're going to add a marker layer, and we're going to use, again, the Superstore data. Now, as you can see, the coordinate reference system defaulted to WGS84 Lola, whereas this is in Mercator. And as you can see, the entire thing was shifted in the wrong direction. We switch it to Mercator, and it still doesn't work. Why is that? Well, it's because our positioning is set to zip, and it's set to the US state and US zip code geocoding hierarchies. This is not the geocoding hierarchy that we're using here. As we talked about in a previous video, geocoding hierarchy is effectively a table that contains geographic units and their associated Latin longs. These geocoding hierarchies are the default ones that come with Spotfire. However, we used a shapefile that was not a default Spotfire shapefile. Therefore, we have to assign a new geocoding hierarchy based on our new shapefile. In this case, again, we're using state, so we're going to go up to state. Where's our state at? State. We are going to select a new geocoding hierarchy. Use the one from our current analysis, US_state. We're going to get rid of the old ones. And now we have points by state. How do we know to put points by state? Well, we have a data relationship, the same one that we used previously. And now we're using this geocoding hierarchy to say for every state that we see in our state, US state data table, assign a value based on an aggregation of superstore.state. We can color these values by total sales, and we can change these colors to be shades of green versus shades of blue so we can actually look and see which states have both the most profitability as well as the most sales. And then we can size those by one other item, say for instance, row count. So whichever one has the most transactions. We can see the most amount of transactions, the most amount of revenue, and the amount of profit. But we don't have to stop just there. We may want to look a little deeper. While now we're coloring by sums of sales, we can actually use pie charts. And we can say, let's get rid of those percentage signs, and now we can say that our sector sales are the size by, sector sized by sales, and have our coloring now be our customer segments. So we're looking at profitability. The darker the state, the more profitable it is. The larger the size of the pie, the higher the quantity of sales. And we're looking at different sizes of pie to see what segments are making up those sales. Now for a quick review on what we just discussed. When uploading a shapefile, remember to use all the metadata. All the files that will come with the shapefile. When you found them online, you'll see a bunch of them. They'll all be zipped together. Make sure that all those are in the same directory so that you can use them effectively. Next, make sure that the coordinate reference systems are the same in the overall properties of your map visualization and in the individual layers. That'll make sure that everything is displayed appropriately. Finally, use the shapefile as the geohierarchy for your marker layer. This is if you want to display markers on top of your shapefile. This makes sure that you're not displaying the standard geographical hierarchies for the map layer. You're displaying the lats and longs that are associated with the values in the shapefile. Thank you so much for your time. If you want any more information on this subject or Spotfire in general, please contact our organization at rapid@syntelli.com. Thank you.